Okay, so it's just like this. Hi! Hello! Oh, not that close. Let's back up a little bit. I hope this mic is okay for y'all. This is the best I can do as of right now. If you notice anything different, I got a camera. I finally got a camera! So there should be a video on that because I don't want to take up too much time here. So excited that I finally have a camera. That makes me just so happy that I don't have to use my phone anymore. But anyways, hi guys! Welcome back to the channel that has arisen from the dead. This always happens. Took like a little summer break and now we're back. So hello. Thank you guys so much for your patience and understanding. I really do appreciate it. I know a lot of y'all are here for review content, but hopefully we'll be open to the possibility of me exploring more than that. If you know me, I've been a Percy Jackson girly forever. I've always been a Percy Jackson kid. I think the first videos I ever filmed of myself besides Get Ready With Me's were Percy Jackson like quiz videos. So it's always been super sentimental and special to me, and I'm so glad that y'all can be here for the ride. If you notice, this is a little bit more blank than it normally is. We are currently in the process of moving, so that's why things are the way they are. But I'm so excited because we're going to be moving to a space that allows us to have kind of a studio, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited for all of it. Nevertheless, this is not the video to be talking about all of that. This video is about Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Let's just go ahead, let's get into it. So Percy Jackson, I kind of wanted to go into the history of how I found out what Percy Jackson was, what made me want to read it, etc, etc. Basically, me and my family, which is my mom and dad and my sister, my middle sister, because I've just, anyways, one of my sisters, we were going down to, I believe, either San Diego or Long Beach, California to watch my brother swim, which I think is just so, it's so interconnected if you think about it. He had a swimming competition and that day it got canceled. So me and my family decided, you know what, let's go and see a movie. Let's go do something. So we went to Regal Cinemas, which is important for later. I remember our parents let us choose between like two movies, and me and my sister were both like, oh my god, we want to see Percy Jackson and the Olympians, because it was PG-13, so it was like super like, oh my god, we're so scandalous. We just thought it looked cool. We loved Greek mythology and everything like that. Both me and my sister were absolute nerds, so we were like, hell yeah, let's do this. And we saw Percy Jackson and the Olympians for the first time, and I fell in love with that movie. I was obsessed with the movie. I hadn't heard nothing of the books. I hadn't read them, so I was like, dude, this is the best thing I've ever seen. My little like, oh my god, how old was I? Probably like 11, 12-year-old brain. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. I think it was like a couple years later in 7th grade, I was forced to do a book report. And at the time, I wasn't really too big of a reader. I didn't really enjoy it as much because a lot of my reading felt like forced. And so I was like, oh, I guess I'll read something. And I remember watching the Percy Jackson movies and I was like, well, let me watch the book because I read the movie, so that'll be perfect.
Well, let me watch the book because I read the movie, so...
But the first book, The Lightning Thief, seemed too long. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna read The Sea Monsters because that's the shortest one there. So I ended up reading the Percy Jackson series, but I started with the second book. So that was a whole thing. Read the second book, absolutely fell in love with it. Read the third, read the fourth, read the fifth, and then I went back and I read the first. And that series has been so special to me forever because of all that. I fell in love with the book series, but Percy Jackson really kind of pushed my love for reading. This is one of my kitties. And if I hadn't had read those books, I don't think I would have had the passion for reading that I do nowadays. Like, I love collecting books and having series. I was in it. I was serious about it. Percy Jackson really pushed that side of me to be into books. And so I'm grateful to it. So fast forward a couple years, 2020, we get the announcement that the Percy Jackson series is happening and I absolutely lose my mind. And if you guys have watched the movies, because I watched Sea of Monsters too, before I read any of the books. And so, you know, going back reading the books and then going and watching the movies, you're like, okay, I see why people hate this. Because I love the movies before reading the books, and then after I was like, ooh. Oh. Not to say that the movies are horrible movies. In terms of the book, does not match up with the series. It does not hold up. A couple years later, we get that announcement, and we get the announcement that Rick and Becky are going to be a part of this, and it's going to be a Disney Plus series, and like all this stuff is coming out, and I'm just like sobbing because my childhood wanted this forever. There's a lot of things that have been adapted into media. Avatar: The Last Airbender is now doing a Netflix show, like all this other stuff, right? That I just don't really care for. I don't see the need for a lot of live action series, especially when it's animated or written. It's like, well, why aren't the books good enough? Why aren't the animations good enough? Why do we have to make everything a live action? But I think with Percy Jackson, this is a little different because we've wanted to see this on screen because you're bringing in more people who are gonna know about this story. And I think Percy Jackson is such a it deserved the Harry Potter treatment for sure. It deserved everything from the very beginning, and I'm very adamant about that. I'm so glad that the show is bringing in new viewers to get to see people who have never read the books or heard of them and get to see their takes. Has been so much fun. Alexis has read the first book, but she hasn't read the rest of the series, so it's so much fun to see what she's thinking and what, you know, she's predicting and all that stuff. It's just an actual dream come true. Flash forward a couple years to 2023, get this tweet on Twitter, which maybe I'll put here. One of the people I follow on Twitter posted this thing about screenings a couple days ahead. And I'm like, oh, you know, maybe we can go, but you know, there's 2 in Texas and I live in Texas. So I'm like, well, maybe we could make the drive, you know, but I don't know. And I talked to my girlfriend, I'm like, listen, like I have to do this for my younger self. I got the RSVP for both of us. I have to do this. And so we make like the 2.5-hour drive to Houston and we go watch Percy Jackson, the series, the first 2 episodes. And it was just such a surreal experience. It was just something I never thought I was ever going to experience. The screening itself, not great. The whole organization of it in Houston was not my favorite. The way that the wristbands were given out to like special people. Like there was literally like 5 or 6 rows that were taken up for like reserved people and then 4 rows for people who just did the little Twitter thing. And that really angered me. I was like, I wish we were told that ahead of time because I knew it was first come first serve, but I also didn't know that there were going to be like specific seats reserved for like every other single person. So me and my girlfriend are in the theater and we're frantically looking for seats to sit in. Finally, like they start playing the episode and then I stop at the episode and they're like, yeah, we're just waiting for a few more people, guys, and then we'll start the full episode again. And I was like, oh my god, this is such a mess. Please let me do the organization for the next Texas screening for PGO. Please let me do it. Me and my girlfriend are like frantically looking for seats and she finally is like, you know what, there are people who haven't sat in the reserve seating yet, like let's go sit down, let's go, you know, until they kick us out, let's go do that. So we ended up finding really good seats because my girlfriend was like, you're gonna watch this, like I don't care what I have to do.
You wanna know what a motherfucking boss looks like, bitch, you looking at one. A bitch that handles big business.
So I'm forever grateful to Lexi. We sat down and we watched it and it literally, like, I was just like,
Stay in the box, no! Stay in the box, no!
reacting to it the entire time, just kind of in awe. And at the very end of the 2 episodes that I started crying. I was like, oh my god, this just hit me. We're getting an actual series. We're getting an actual portrayal of a correct Percy, of a correct Grover, of a correct Annabeth, of a correct Camp Half-Blood. It made me so happy. 2 new episodes, obviously I'm gonna go more into detail, but I fell in love with them. We also got these shirts at the screening, which is really cool. It looks like a normal like Camp Half-Blood shirt. I'll try to take a picture of the back, but the back has like the signatures of Percy, Annabeth, and Grover, and I think like the actors actually did it, like Leah, Walker, and Aryan. So I think that's so cool. I'm like forever gonna treasure this, and I like kept our wristbands and everything, like our little blue wristbands that we got because I want to hang it up with a poster and everything. I'm such a nerd. But yeah, I'm gonna forever treasure this for sure, and I hope that I can meet more of the actors and actresses, etc., and get them to sign it. I think that'd be really dope. We also went to a bookstore. I will put the name here. If y'all are ever in Houston though, you should definitely go to it. Just the kindest bookstore ever. Everyone who was there, just so sweet and so accepting, and they saw our Camp Half-Blood t-shirts that me and Alexis were wearing, and they're like, oh my god, we have to talk to you. Apparently Rick Riordan has been there before and signed copies of books, and he's done a bunch of book events down there, and so I'm like, okay, so we're definitely gonna have to make the trip down here in like a couple years or so. But it was just so exciting, and it was such a cool day having that experience, being around other people who are as passionate about the series as I am. It was just such a fulfilling experience. I was scared I was gonna be like the only like 20-year-old in a sea of teenagers and kids, but it was just a mixture. There was just people from like ages 5 to 50. For this series, I am not gonna be doing reactions. I really want to sit down and enjoy the series as it is. I don't want to worry about how I'm coming off on camera. I really want to be able to sit there and collect my thoughts and be real and authentic. Of course, I'll probably be screaming about it on Twitter, which, by the way, want to give a full warning about that. It's just I'm only on Twitter right now just for Percy Jackson, just to be involved in that world. And after that, I'm logging off again. So I want to be very clear about that. I'm not coming back onto Twitter. I'm only doing it to scream about my characters, okay? There's not going to be reactions. There's going to be reviews. So I'm going to sit down. I literally, like, last night sat down and just, like, took a bunch of notes, like a shit ton of notes, because I was like, I want to have my thoughts all in a cohesive, concise spirit, and I want to say it correctly and everything like that. And then before we get into talking about the episode, I do want to address what's happening with Disney Plus and Disney in general in Palestine. Obviously, if you don't know about the situation that's going on in the Middle East right now, that's on you. I think that's a thing that everyone should be aware of right now. But if you're seriously living under a rock, dig yourself out and do some research about it, because it's a nasty thing that's going on, which is not even covering the half of it. It's awful. It's a genocide. I highly do not suggest getting a Disney Plus subscription and supporting Disney through this massacre that's going on. Me doing these reviews is really just kind of trying to heal my inner child, and this is something I've waited for forever. That kind of want and that kind of love for this series does not overtake what's happening in the real world, and I want to be so serious and so clear about that. I don't want anyone thinking, oh, she's putting up these reviews and she doesn't care about Palestine and she's not aware of what's going on. Absolutely not. I want to just get that out there first and foremost, because that's important and I don't want that being misconstrued. But anyways, let's get into the episode. Guys, I'm still figuring out this camera. Give me a second. Okay, let's get into Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the series. This is crazy, y'all. Also, I hope my microphone's okay. You're just gonna have to deal with this until I get an actual microphone. Let's try to go through this all pretty quickly because I have 49 minutes to fill. First episode is called I Accidentally Vaporized My Pre-Algebra Teacher. I love that they're using the actual chapters from the books as chapter titles. That makes me so insanely excited. The beginning monologue that Walker gives word from the book was just absolutely insane. I could not believe that they included that, but I should have known, because Rick wanted to be very faithful to this project and to the books. When I heard like, oh, I didn't want to be a half-blood, or you know, whatever is the first line from the book, I was like, I'm sad. That's it. Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, give them all the awards. I was just like, holy shit. And the way that Walker's voice portrays Percy too, perfection. No notes. Flawless. Like, it was so good. Them showing glimpses of Percy growing up, like these flashbacks of him noticing him being a demigod and all these things, like little details he's noticing, I just thought was so neat and so good to add, because in the book they really go into like, oh, when he was younger he like tied a snake into a knot and strangled it and like all that stuff. So it was giving that context and doing more showing than telling, and I really appreciated that. And we also got our first glimpse of Blackjack. I was like, my baby. There's been so many debates about who should voice Blackjack. I don't know particularly who I would want to voice Blackjack as of now, but someone who I've always had in my mind while reading it has been Danny DeVito. I don't know why, but it would be awesome. It would be really cool if they got him. The actor for Little Percy, that was Euphoria casting. Like, that was like, they got his twin replica and was like, all right, go. It's insane. His face card is exactly like Walker's. It's insane, and his acting is so good. His little like, mom, I was like, ugh, like, you're my child. Like, I'm literally about to cry right now. Percy being an artist is so ADHD coded. It's so real. My girlfriend's also an artist. I feel like it's a thing that a lot of ADHD people like will have an artistic trait, and so getting to see him like do his little doodles and everything of everything he's seen, it was just such a cool little touch. So I loved it. Mythomagic being talked about before like book 3, because we know that Nico loves Mythomagic. He's obsessed with it. He has all the cards and everything like that. But having the Mythomagic just kind of like appear already, be a thing that we're talking about and knowing about, is adding so much to the story. And then we go over to the Met, right, to the New York Met, and I feel like the most unreal thing about this show was the $1 water. Like, if you ever show me a place where you can buy a bottle of water or a cup of water for $1, like, let me know, because I don't have that experience anymore. So we love capitalism, woo. The way that Chiron would just be my favorite teacher. I love my English teachers. I love my history teachers. They're just people who are genuinely like they find the connection between what they're teaching into real life. Those are my favorite kind of people, because you can tell that they're passionate and you can tell that they really care about their students. So I know I would be like Percy in that situation, where I'd be like attached to the hip of Mr. Bronner. Like I would just like, I would trust him with my life. I would just like tell him everything that was going on, and he'd probably be like, I don't get paid enough for this. I love Chiron. I loved Chiron in the book, but his portrayal in the series, in the TV series, is like so comforting. I love it. The dyslexia showing. I think we got a little bit of it in the movies. I don't want to completely discredit the movies. I think we got shown it a little bit, really more diving into that dyslexia, and I hope we get more fleshing out of that as well and get the, you know, explanation. Your brain is hardwired to see and speak Greek. So cool. I love that. I love that, like not making someone feel bad for their disability, and instead being like, no, this is like a superpower of yours. Then we flash to Percy and his mom when he's younger and talking about his namesake Perseus. If you've read Heroes of Olympus, I think we meet the actual Perseus, and he is a complete and total piece of shit. We do not like him, but kind of him looking up into this heroine of who he was named after was so special and so important, because it really is just kind of foreshadowing everything that he's about to go through. The Medusa head being held in the one hand and everything. I see you foreshadowing. You're doing real good. I love the quote that Sally gives Percy, or the talk that Sally gives Percy of, not all heroes are heroes, or not all people who look like heroes are gonna be heroes, not all people who look like monsters are monsters. There's been so many discussions about who that could be about. The two main people I think that applies to, obviously not for the entire series, but as of right now, is Medusa and Luke. Medusa, you know, you see her, you see everything she's done, and you're like, oh my god, she's a horrible character, and she's awful to these people, and this and that. But you have to remember what happened to Medusa. Like, what exactly made Medusa Medusa? Just learning her history and everything. She's not a monster at the end of the day. She was given really bad circumstances, and she chose to do what she did. You can even argue that with Luke. Oh, is Luke truly a monster? Spoilers, if you haven't read the books or watched the entire series, Luke is not a good guy. So we who have read the book know, oh, you're seeing Luke as this like really good guy and this friend to Percy, and you know, you're seeing him as this hero at Camp Half-Blood, but at the end of the series, even at the end of this season or book, you know that he's not the guy that he's telling everyone he is. I'm sorry, I'm trying like not to spoil it too much and not to go into it too much, because I really want this to be an authentic and real thing for people who haven't watched the series, but it's a little hard. I've known about this for like 10 plus years. This quote from the actual story of Perseus that Sally tells him about how Perseus's that's so hard to say, mom in the mythology, or in the myth, told him, hold fast Perseus, brave the storm. The amount of I'm gonna get this tattooed on my forehead I've seen on Twitter is insane. I kind of want to get it tattooed, but then again, I don't. I think it's so important to Percy's character that he heard these words from his mom, and that he heard this story from his mom. His mom telling him all these stories about Greek mythology is so important, because Sally really has this lens of no one's truly all good and no one's truly all bad. Like we all have these areas that we fall into, and she really does teach Percy that growing up. And so him holding on to those words and battling the Minotaur and everything, just, I wanted to cry. Percy like waking up from his daydream is so neurodivergent coded. I feel like there's so many ND kids who have been like, will be daydreaming in the middle of the day and like wake up and be like, oh shit, like we gotta like be normal. And so I'm really glad they included that little part. And also the part where Mrs. Dodds is like, oh, you'll learn to behave, Percy, and this and that. Obviously we know why she's saying that given the context and everything, but in the moment, especially from Percy's point of view, it's kind of just like, what was I doing? I literally was not doing anything, and now I'm getting blamed for something and I'm in trouble. And I think again, that's another thing that a lot of ND kids will go through, getting blamed for stuff that they have no explanation for, and that they're like, hey, I genuinely wasn't trying to do anything wrong, but now you're blaming me, so I don't know what to do. So the pen, oh my god, I've seen so much discussion about this, right? Because in the movies, Logan Lerman gets the pen and he's like, it's a pen, and that's like quoted by like everyone and seen as like god tier cinema, which I get. It's funny. It's a funny line. I'm not gonna discredit it. But I really enjoy the way that they did it in the show, where Chiron gives him the pen as like, this is a powerful instrument. One, because obviously it's Riptide. We know that. Second of all, because a pen can be used for so many things, especially if you've read the full series. If you know, you know. And I think it's such like a double entendre moment of like, a pen is such an important weapon, and I think it's like a little bit of like a Rick call out too. Like, he wrote these books, he wrote this world. It's a weapon, like ultimately. Like, your pen can do real good or real damage. And so I really enjoyed that. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too much into it, maybe I'm using my English brain, but I really enjoyed that. Aryan Simhadri. Simhadri? I swear to God, guys, I know how to talk. I know how to do it. It just won't work sometimes. He truly embodies Grover and his kindness and his fear. The main traits of Grover, Aryan nails it. Like, he completely understands that character. And to see that come to life in the way that it does, because that was one of my biggest gripes of the movies, honestly, it was that Grover's character was more of like the comic relief. And it's like, Grover, yes, he has his funny moments and things like that, but he's not the comic relief of the story. He's a very important part of the story, and he shows that true fear and that true hesitancy of this world. And it's so important to show that, you know, especially as, you know, he's 24 years old, but being seen as a kid, like, it's so important to have that. The water pulling Nancy. When I saw this for the first time, the effect of Nancy falling back into the fountain, I was like, and then I watched it back a couple more times, and I was like, you know what? Like, I like that. I like that. I like that Percy like goes to push her, and instead it's the water pulling her back, and he like barely puts his hands out to push her too. I had to come back to that moment, but I really ended up enjoying it. Riptide shaking and vibrating in Percy's hand. I never imagined that. I think it was mentioned in the books a couple times that Riptide would like shake or something like that, but I never imagined it quite the way that the TV series did it. And because it's in New York, and because I love Percy and Spider-Man, it just reminded me so much of Spidey Senses, and I can't quit calling it like Percy's Spidey Senses. The pen is like his alarm, and it is a thing for demigods too, to kind of sense danger coming, and I feel like it's so cool having that be through his sword. That's so cool. The Dodge transformation, I was so worried about this. I was so worried about the monster transformation because, you know, it's Disney Plus. They got a budget, I understand, but sometimes they don't use it to the full effect. But they said budget. We got the money, we'll do it. Miss Todd's transformation was so good. It was so good. I remember like watching, what was it, Twilight or something, and seeing the transformation of the teenagers into the wolves and stuff, the werewolves, and it just didn't gag me in the same way that this did. Like Mrs. Dodd's transformation, insane, and that's all I can say about that. Her doing her talking through her head, like not actually speaking to Percy, I think is such a neat little thing to add in. I like never would have had expected that. The next thing I noticed was Riptide forming. So Riptide forming into Riptide and Dodds dissolving, just the effects were just so good. They were there. The glance between Chiron and Grover and Percy is being like, no, there wasn't Miss Dodds. Like, she tried to attack me and all that stuff. It hurt me because I remember reading that, oh, they glanced at each other and then glanced back at me. And that's just so frustrating because you know that something is there, but it won't be told to you. The Rick cameo, perfection. I saw someone go into it on Twitter or TikTok or whatever and being like, oh, Chiron is like the right hand, he believes Percy, he's supporting Percy, and then you have the left hand, which is like Rick, you know, and this was his story and everything, so he knows. And I know people were like going into it and dissecting it. I would highly recommend looking up what they say because it's a lot more coherent than what I'm saying. I really love that they gave him a cameo without making him the star of the show, because I feel like that would have been just a little jarring for me. I want a Yancey sweatshirt. Like, fuck Yancey, but I want a Yancey sweatshirt. I want all the merch from the show. It's insane. Percy standing by what happened, him being like, I didn't push Nancy. Such a powerful statement, I think, for a lot of young kids, you know, who feel pressured to lie because they think that's the right thing to do. You gotta be honest about stuff. You gotta stand on business sometimes, and he did. He stood his ground, and I was really proud of him. And then the change, I don't think this happens in the book, but Grover like lying about Percy and being like, no, I did see you like push her and like plan to push her and all that stuff, and Percy not knowing it was to protect him and for his own benefit, put me in a coffin. Like, send me out to see because that shit hurt. That scene just shows Grover being such a true friend of like, hey, like I know I'm gonna get you in trouble, but I love you, you know, like I adore you and I don't want anything to happen to you. That one little line of like,
I know, at least you think.
from Chiron, like not him gaslighting him like that, like that's crazy. But I really think, you know, Chiron was like itching to tell him and be like, oh, you know, like you're on the precipice of like knowing who you are and what you are and everything, but I can't tell you. I would be so frustrated. Chiron telling Percy that he's probably gonna have the most difficult journey out of all the kids he's known. Obviously Percy doesn't know, like Chiron is like a trainer of all these demigods, but getting told that by Chiron, who's lived for like a gazillion years, like that hurts. Percy has been through so much. Again, if you read all the books, it's just like, how has this boy not given up yet? It's insane the amount of things that he goes through and gets put through. You know, Chiron's right. He called him out and it sucks. The maintenance guy, oh my god, when Percy comes back home and the maintenance guy feeling sorry for Percy coming back home, that says all you need to know. That says all you need to know about Gabe as a person and about Percy's home life. That's it. It could have faded to black. Just kidding, I would have wanted to see what the home life is like, but it could have faded to black and you would have perfectly understood what was going on in his life. The whole, oh, you answered mom's cell when Gabe was like, yeah, I pick up whatever is ringing. I hope you choke on a tortilla chip because yeah, no, you suck. The people being like, oh, Gabe wasn't abusive enough, which I'll get into, that alone, you're going through someone else's phone and you're saying, oh, I pick up whatever's ringing in the house and you're not even employed. Get the fuck out. I truly hope Hades is the worst to him. And you'll see what I mean. Also, Percy's comebacks to Gabe and not engaging in the behavior. Because there will be a lot of narcissistic, abusive parents who will be very like, oh, I'm trying to get you to fight with me. And him just like completely being like, I'm not doing this. First of all, it's so mature for a 12-year-old. Second of all, it's so sad because it is such a like a trauma response to these kind of things. And he shouldn't ever have to be doing that. Oh my god. Can we talk about Olivia Rodrigo? Logical by Olivia Rodrigo from Guts, which is, I think, one of my girlfriend's favorite songs ever, was playing. We got told multiple times that Olivia Rodrigo was going to have a song, and I was going to be like, oh my god, it's like Ballad of a Homeschool Girl or Brutal or something like that because it would fit so well. And then we got Logical, and that was like the last song I thought was going to be a part of this. So good on whoever was running the soundtrack because y'all are crazy. And Sally being out in the rain and crying is so real. It's just so relatable. Sally, you know, like talking to Percy and being like, I believe my kid. Like, can we have more of that? Like, there's a few parents who need to not believe their kids as much, honestly. But there's a lot of other parents who's like, no, I don't believe my kid at all. And it's like, you need to do that. You need to have some kind of trust in your kid. Sally Jackson, we love you. Mother. The blue candy. Just, we got no blue food in the movies. We got no blue food, which is so disappointing and so upsetting. It's like, you guys could have at least kept that. It's so important to the story. It sounds stupid, but it's so important to the story and to Percy's character. So to have that be shown was just so satisfying. Also, they called Mr. Brunner Mr. Bruner, okay? In the musical and in a lot of the audiobooks, they'll call Chiron Mr. Brunner. So I always say Mr. Brunner, and it just flows better for me, Mr. Brunner. But they kept saying Mr. Bruner, and I was like, Mr. Bruner? Who is that? Like, it just threw me for a loop. The score in the background, not the soundtrack, I love the soundtrack, but the score in the background. Like, whoever did that, Oscar, Emmy, Grammy. Some of the composers were from Black Sails and some of them were from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it's like, how did y'all get that? Like, realistically, how did y'all get that? I love that Montauk is a part of this. Makes me so happy. So let's talk about Gabe. Let's get into controversy of Gabe. So a lot of people were like, oh, his abusiveness was downplayed. And I partially agree with that. I partially agree with like, oh, he didn't seem as like horrible as he did when I was reading the books, even when I was younger. And even now, I read the book a couple months ago, I reread it and I was like, oh my god, like he's awful. I agree with a lot of people in that abusiveness shows up in different ways, and it doesn't always show up in the form of yelling at someone or screaming at someone or hitting someone. It could be shown in a lot of different ways, unfortunately. There's a couple of reasons why I think it was downplayed in the first episode and the first time that we meet him. I think the first reason why I believe this is that it is a Disney thing. Disney could be very like, oh, let's be careful about what we show and what we do and what we represent. At the same time, Disney, you've put out Tangled, which has an abusive mother. But anyways, my second reasoning is that they're building up to Gabe being this horrible, awful character, and they want to build up to it instead of going straight into it, which I could see happening. Third reasoning is that Rick and the writers and whoever's in charge of running the show don't want to trigger people, and this is something that I would like heavily understand and agree with them doing, and see why they're not making Gabe as horrible as he could be, because a lot of people have domestic abuse issues and get triggered by that, you know, and like I've been through abusive situations myself, and I know that sometimes when you watch those things and you put yourself back into that scenario, it's not good. Could just be censoring that. I ultimately think it's a mix of all three of those reasons of why they downplayed the abusiveness of Gabe. I think that they definitely will build on it and show why Sally does the thing that she does at the end of the series. Again, not the end of the series, the end of the season. Again, I don't want to spoil things, but hopefully they'll explain it. The D'Angelo's mentioned. I was gagged. I love Nico D'Angelo. Not his biggest fan, but I love him. He's my son. To get that little reference, I'm like, oh my god, are we like slightly referencing things here? Because they could have gone with like Romiano's, you know, like any other Italian last name. And they went with D'Angelo's, and I was like, okay, I see you. I love that we see Sally's like candy store uniform in the background. I don't know, I really enjoyed that. Throughout these episodes, there was like cuts and fades to black for the ads. And when I was watching it, like it worked, you know, because it would go to an ad and I'd be like, oh, okay, I understand that. But when you're watching it in a theater or you're watching it online, totally legally, it doesn't flow too well. It just is very jarring and very, you know, like, oh, why are we stopping? I get what they're trying to go for here, but it's also like, kind of fell flat, like a little bit. It didn't have to be that hard of a cut. Like it could have transitioned a little bit better and I would have enjoyed that a lot more. I remember seeing it in the movie theater and being like, oh, maybe they cut some stuff out. No, it was just like that. The nightmares being included. Can we talk about this? Another thing that was sorely missed in the Percy Jackson movies. These nightmares are so important. Literally, like if you read any of the books, you cannot read any of the stories without getting through a nightmare or getting through a dream. And it's so important to demigods because it's not only just a nightmare or a dream, it's literally like a prophecy coming to you, an actual thing that's happening coming to you in your sleep that you need to be paying attention to. So I really enjoyed that they included that. Cronus's voice. Who does Cronus's voice? Maybe it's out, but his voice is so scary and is so spooky for no reason. I literally like had chills down my back and I was like, oh yeah, this is a bad guy. When they're driving to Montauk and Percy wakes up from the dream and you see Sally just like, she was crying. I was like it just hurt. The little shoulder tap, I don't know if you guys noticed that, where like Percy goes up to Sally, taps her on the shoulder and then goes like that and whatever. Walker ended up doing that to Virginia in like an interview or something like that. It's such a little like subtle thing, you know, but it shows a lot of like the relationship between the two and it's so sweet. They are definitely taking home the best mom and son award for sure. Percy's explanation of him being a demigod, obviously he doesn't know he's a demigod at this time, but him explaining what's going on and happening to him is such a real experience of ND kids and just feeling lost and feeling stupid, you know, and feeling like I don't know why everyone else can do these things and I can't. It made me want to cry. Like it made me like, as someone who's also ND and someone who grew up like that, was super successful in school and loved the things I learned, but there were things that I didn't do as well and there were things that I struggled with that my other peers didn't. It was so frustrating and I thought I was broken, just like Percy said. Virginia Cole, can we talk about her? Can we talk about her? I don't know how I've never watched anything with her acting in it, but it's so good. It's so motherly and so like young motherly too. It just makes you feel gravitated towards her as a character and she really just stole the show. She didn't just deliver her lines, she really embodied them and I just have to shout her out because I think she should win an Emmy for this. It was insane. I was like, oh my god, you're Sally Jackson. That's crazy. Also the joke about the septic tank. Y'all nailed that sass. Y'all nailed that Percy sass too well. When Sally's explaining like the traits of Poseidon and she goes, and noble. If you've seen the musical, she like really gets into describing Poseidon. And so in my mind, I was like, oh, was she about to say some more stuff about him? Was there more to the story that she was gonna say, but she's gotta keep it like PG appropriate? I don't know. It was funny. If you've seen the musical, you know. The hesitation to get the explanation of who Percy's father is as a god out. Again, I need Virginia Cole to earn her flowers, because it was so realistic of being like, oh my god, my son's probably gonna think I'm crazy. You know, she's like, ultimately I know that this truth has to come out, or else it's gonna come out without me being able to tell it. And it was so good. The delivery was just so good. And the fucking god, like Jesus, Percy fully believing that his mom is Mother Mary, Virgin Mother Mary, got to me. That was such a good addition to that scene. And I think I would have responded the same way, especially because I grew up Catholic. If my parents were like, yeah, like I fell in love with a god, and you're like, oh, so God. So you're like really committed to your faith. Like, it was just so good. I love that. The pearl necklace on Sally. I want to know. I know that we're going to get more into Sally and Poseidon's relationship, which I'm so excited about. That's always been a relationship I've wanted to explore. Spoilers again, but the fact that he offered to build her a palace and all this stuff because he loved her so much. Insane. I want to know more. I want to know more about that pearl necklace, and also that the pearl necklace comes back around with Percy too. So when Half-Blood is said, the note changes in the score. Brilliant, brilliant. Percy trying to deny the Half-Blood explanation and the demigod explanation, and him calling himself broken. Again, such an ND kid thing. Our world, when you're like diagnosed as like ADHD or whatever, it's still like, oh no, there's just something like wrong with me. And we don't really take the mentality or an actual like diagnosis and the way that we should. And I think it's such a unique parallel to draw. When Grover comes and Percy's like, I want to see him. Okay. I completely understand it. If my friend threw me under the bus like that, I'd be like, fuck this dude. Like, I don't want to, no, I'm not talking to them. But also knowing everything that they go through, I was just like, don't say that. Don't say that to him. Percy finding out about Grover, seeing his legs, and being like, you have half a goat in your pants. I was cackling. I thought that was like the funniest thing I had ever seen. Definitely like top 10 funniest moments so far from the Percy Jackson series. The audio in the car scene when they get in the car and they're driving to Camp Half-Blood was ultimately not my favorite. I didn't love the mixing. I understand they were like going through a storm and you're in a car, and so there's gonna be noises, unfortunately. But I did not love the mixing that much. That was like one of my main gripes with that scene, and it really drew me out of that scene and believing what was happening through it. So unfortunately, that's like a little negative in my book. I love the casual reveal of Grover's horns, because I feel like in the movie they made a huge deal about it, and in the TV series it's just kind of like, oh yeah, he has horns, like he has these ears and stuff. Like the more important reveal was his legs, because it was like, dude, how did you cover that up for so long? Like your walking is literally inhabited by that, so how did you fake that for so long? When Grover's like, oh, you didn't tell him about camp, to Sally, and the stare down from Percy, you just know Walker is gonna eat those later seasons up. You just know, because Percy is so kind and so funny and such a lovable character, but at the same time, you know, he's scary. Like, and he just nailed it. It was just so good. I wish there was more trying to understand this creature. It came down from wherever, got literally lightning struck onto this world. I wish there was more understanding to be like, what is that? You know, instead of like, is that the Minotaur? I don't know. I just didn't really believe it fully. I really wanted more of a like, what is that kind of moment? But again, I could be terribly wrong and it could be perfect and I'm just pulling out of my ass. In my opinion, I wish there was a little bit more trying to understand that. He's wearing underpants. Thank you for including that, and also had me dying. The Minotaur's CGI could have gone so badly. It could have flopped so horribly, but they killed that shit. That shit was just, it was god tier. It was so good. Mythomagic, the cards being the training for Percy, is just, oh, it's gonna tie in so well with Nico. I'm so glad they added that in. The fucking,
I'm actually 24.
Is me on Twitter all the time. People being like, you're not 19? I'm like 22 and I pay rent and I do bills and it sucks. Sally fighting back. Oh my god, I love this. I love this when there's movies or TV shows or whatever and they're adapting it from somewhere and they make the mom have this like kind of warrior spirit, because it's so true. When you're a mom, I've never been a mom, but I've been a motherly figure to people, and you get very protective of the people who, like, you know, you're caring for, you're taking care of, and you will do literally anything. I saw one person saying, oh, that's so out of character for Sally Jackson. I'm like, Sally Jackson, the same person, spoiler alert, I'm so sorry, I'm trying so hard, but it's really hard. The same person who picked up a gun in the last book and aimed it at monsters. I don't think so. I don't think so. The blue lighting. Can we talk about this? Because I feel like it has been such a thing in cinema and so many people have addressed this, where night lighting, there's just no lighting when it comes to nighttime scenes. You can't see anything. Like, I'm literally like, when I'm trying to watch like a night scene on TV, I don't know what it is. Why are we making things so dark? Like, my seeing is already as bad as it is. So the blue light, or using lights from like the car or the sword, like, it was just so cool. It was so good, and I love that they included that. So I thought the lighting, whoever was in charge of that and in designing that, was absolutely brilliant. I saw some people on Twitter, TikTok, whatever, not really complaining, but just being like, oh, I didn't like how Thalia's tree, which, is it Thalia? Is it Thalia? I don't know what it is anymore. Everyone says her name differently, so whatever. But people are complaining about the size of her tree. I actually really agree with the small tree. And I'll tell you why. The gods do not care about their kids as much as they want to be like, yeah, we send gifts to you, and we watch over you, and we tell you what to do and what not to do. They don't care. They don't care about their kids. So it's like, why would Thalia have a gigantic tree, you know, as a monument to her? It's not gonna be big. It's gonna be a little tree. Like, it made sense in my mind. Also, like the rain scenes. I've been on a set before where they did a rain scene, and it was so interesting because it's really just like, you have a hose and you're just raining on people. I've always wondered, how do you not get sick? Like, I know, like, when we did it with like warm water, but eventually that water turns cold. So I'm like, how did they not get sick? Like, I would be coughing and sneezing. I don't know. It was just something on my mind. The framing and stuff